Thank you for welcoming us onto your headphones. I'm Alex.
And I'm Eddie.
I am Fernando, and we are reviewing Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. And this is the rollback. Short synopsis. The Fellowship has broken up. It has splintered into three groups. Samwise and Frodo on to their journey to destroy the ring. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas on their journey to save Merry and Pippin, who have been captured by Saruman's Uruk-hai. And along the way, delving into the deeper history of the War for the Ring.
So, we're jumping into the second film of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and goddamn, there's so much to unpack here. Wasn't this the lowest grossing of the three?
I'm not sure about that. Budget 94 million, box office 951. So I mean, it made a lot, especially for 2002.
Yeah, if this was the lowest grossing, I would be fairly surprised, just because I found myself right from the get-go really enjoying this movie.
It picks up right where the last one left off, and the opening scene. Even I remember this one when Gandalf and the Balrog just go like ham all the way down towards, was it the center of the earth?
Yeah. Oh, well, no, not the center of the earth, but down a deep cavern.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't their battle culminate on top of a mountain in like the lower earth?
Yeah. Yeah, some sort of mountain. I believe like there's like snow, heavy winds. And eventually it leads to Gandalf murking the Balrog, and eventually giving his own life and ending the journey of Gandalf the Grey.
So so we're jumping a little bit forward here, but fuck it. Let's just do it. What brings Gandalf back? Like, is it like the gods are like, yeah, no, this guy's too valuable. Let's like give him like 1+ life.
Without, like, because I'm not too sure on how the book does it, but I know that there's certain wizards, and the White, which Saruman was, is supposed to be the most powerful wizard of good. He obviously has turned his back on good. And so I don't know who appointed Gandalf to come back as Gandalf the White, but yeah, he gets appointed to basically take the reins from Saruman.
Yeah, the movie, if I recall, has him saying that he was like sent back, and it doesn't really go into great detail about the afterlife. I think you get maybe one shot of Ian McKellen just kind of against a white background, opening his eyes and then coming back. But I mean, given like his garb and kind of the way that he acts and that little bit, you can kind of gather that there's something almost religious about it. There's a resurrection quality. Something has sent him back to kind of complete the mission.
Yeah, I believe there is a heaven in the Lord of the Rings universe.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's where the film opens up with Gandalf and the Balrog going down, and there's really climactic fight scene. And then from there we go to Frodo, Sam, and they find themselves lost, kind of in the mountains. And then they're being tracked by Gollum, and I think this is the first time that we actually see him, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well,
Yeah,
it depends on if you're. Well, it depends if you're talking on the extended or not. I saw him last week in some cutscenes, but as far as the regular versions of the movies, I think it might have been almost a better choice to keep him hidden until this point, because last time I don't believe that he looked quite as good as he does this time.
Oh, and then what no one talks about, I mean, this is pretty much the christening of Andy Serkis, who is pretty much, I think it's fair to say, he's probably the biggest CGI motion capture actor. Like, I say ever. I think that's fair to say.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, when he came out in the Marvel movies, I had to be told that's Andy Serkis, because I'm so used to seeing him behind CGI acting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and as far as Eddie mentioned, this definitely does come out right where the last one left off. But I think that the exposition is handled fairly well for people who, back in the day, it might have been a little bit more difficult to see the first one before getting into the second. They have kind of these throwaway lines where they're discussing what's happened, but it doesn't feel too clunky to me. A lot of the time, exposition can feel kind of overwrought, or it's just obvious it's there for the audience. But here, I think that they're using one of the film's strengths, which is that they're playing more into the relationship between characters, which I really liked. It's Gimli and Legolas kind of talking about what's happened, which is good because I'm going to enjoy the chemistry that I see between the two.
Oh yeah, I mean their chemistry is probably one of the best ones throughout the entire film because obviously dwarves, elves, they don't like each other. There's a big history uh, of them with just this tremendous distrust amongst them. You kind of see it in the future Hobbit movies, where it stems from. But yeah, like as far as we know from Fellowship to now, there's this bitterness between elves and dwarves, and so now that they're forced to work together, there's gonna be some shit talking.
Definitely, definitely. And it's so strange too because I know from what you said, Fernie, that this was all kind of shot as one movie.
Mhm.
They got that trilogy out and they were just sort of releasing and making and releasing and making. But this film does feel different from the last one. And I say that as a compliment because from the very beginning, they do a good job of balancing the tone. And I think Gimli and Legolas, but especially Gimli, the big part of that. He's obviously the kind of comedic relief. All these epic scenes will be happening, and will always have some kind of a joke or a one-liner that lightens the mood, but doesn't feel forced.
Yeah.
Um, so Golem, I guess to give a real quick compliment, Fernie, you touched on the fact that Andy Serkis is kind of the forefront and probably the most recognizable CGI actor on the planet. The effects for Golem don't look that dated.
Least recognizable.
Sorry, least recognizable. But the effects on this film, they don't look very dated. At least not Golem. You can tell where the budget went because he looks very slick. Apparently, they had him filming twice, once with the actors and once without, just to kind of get form proper. And his facial expressions are on point. Like see, like he has to over exaggerate his face. I am sure, but damn, like it holds up.
Gollum,
Yeah.
Is probably the world's most lovable crackhead. I think that I did notice. I thought a little, I don't know, some kind of like a transparency around the eyes a little bit. But other than that, I mean, I think it's held up incredibly well. And that technique that you mentioned, Eddie, of kind of filming once with an actor and then once for the effect, I think that makes a lot of sense because especially when Samwise and him are interacting, that feels very real to me. I mean, they're bickering and kind of Sam's abuse of him. It all feels very natural.
Yeah, because I mean, it seems like Sam understands the severity of his quest, and so Sam pretty much has to be the bad guy, even if he doesn't want to.
Mm.
While Frodo is more sympathetic to Gollum because he understands Gollum because he's going through what Gollum went through. Not as much of a severe pace, but he is having to hold on to this ring, and you can see later on in the movie and throughout the movie itself that he is feeling the pressure of the ring, trying to make its way into his psyche, into his soul.
Oh, definitely. I think that culminates later on, but even at the beginning, I mean, if you play like the beginning of the Fellowship and the beginning of Two Towers, Frodo side by side, I mean, it's a night and day difference. He looks old, and I really believe him when he takes out Sting. He says he's going to cut Gollum's throat. I mean, that's a desperate man right there.
Yeah.
So from their interactions, and I do want to get into the the differences and similarities between Frodo and Gollum later on. But for now that you mentioned, there's three teams. We got Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. They're in pursuit of the orcs. Sorry, Aragorn. Thank you. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and they're in pursuit of the orcs that have Merry and Pippin.
Yep. Aragorn realized that Frodo had to go off on this journey by himself at the end of Fellowship, and he knew what he had to do, and he knew that he had to go on his own path.
Were you guys stressed out for Merry and Pippin? Because they're not battle testers, they're not warriors, and they're not like main characters like Frodo and Sam. So I know they lived to the third one, but if I didn't know better, I'd be like, they're the expendable ones.
Well, I think that you definitely see that difference, because with Frodo and Sam, I mean, you can kind of see how this journey has changed the both of them. For instance, when they pretend to be sleeping, and you might think, I certainly did, that it's just the hobbits being inexperienced and that Gollum is going to kind of get the better of them, but it's a trap in their case. With Merry and Pippin, I don't see that same kind of like guile. They still seem very like happy-go-lucky. So I was concerned.
With Merry and Pippin, because the difference between growing up with Fellowship and then when this one came out, this was my first like DVD, and Fellowship was like my last VHS. So when I got the Two Towers DVD, I watched that second disc of the special features as a kid pretty much on a day-to-day basis. And one thing that I never realized until I was older is Merry and Pippin's story. It's kind of interesting because they are these happy-go-lucky. I mean, they come off as idiots. I mean, really naive. They don't really do much except for laugh and play and mess around. But in this one, you finally see like them culminating into a different path of, we can't just laugh and play. We have to do something. And you see it later on throughout the movie. But yeah, in the very beginning, you see them go from a hostage aspect where they're malnourished, they're pretty much tired, they're drinking something that's definitely not water. And it's funny because you can still see Pippin try to keep their hopes up.
Definitely. And that's kind of a great thing to watch as they progress. And then later with the Ents, you get kind of that contrast between what a hobbit from the Shire is kind of expected to do versus what they end up doing. Before we get to that point, though, we're shown, and I believe this is for the first time, I don't recall seeing them in the last film, the Kingdom of Rohan. Oh
yeah, they are added on to this set.
Now, as far as like my complaints for the last film go, as to how some of the world elements felt kind of oddly placed, Rohan, and in its political aspect, feels a little bit like that to me. I mean, we learn that there's the king, and obviously he's got this advisor who is just blatantly evil. I mean,
yeah, he looks. If you have the definition of evil in front of you, he'd probably be the pictures standing next to it.
I mean, really. So we're kind of thrust into the middle of that story. It is sort of my gripe there, but even that's relatively small because it's explained kind of in a rushed way, but it is explained well so that you understand. And Rohan, as a whole to this story, adds a lot, in my opinion.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're basically... the introduction of Rohan is, for me, it's basically introduction to the War for the Ring isn't as small as you think it is. It's in every corner of this vast world, and it's in this small country that I would say they resemble something sort of like Scotland.
That makes sense, yeah.
And Gondor represents something more civilized and more clean, and like England.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
kind of less wilderness.
and so yeah, they're basically we get thrusted into this separate war, but the war that leads to the culmination of everything in itself, with these people who are men, and we've been introduced to men, but they are very different from the men that we've been introduced to.
Definitely, definitely. I think that as a whole, this movie is really good for getting kind of a sense of scale, and we got that a bit last time, right? Like we get that Isengard is a separate place from Gondor, is a separate place from the two areas that the elves inhabit, which is all separate from Mordor. But here, I think that everything kind of escalates a good bit, and you follow our three kind of story threads, and it was so interesting to me that they didn't intersect at any point. That they didn't, I think that maybe the classic scenario would be to have, for instance, like the Ents fight in the Battle of Helm's Deep, but instead they're in this entirely other geopolitical scenario, basically.
Eddie, your thoughts?
Ents. Okay. The Ents were they kind of they made me smile a lot. The leader is I can't find his name.
Treebeard.
Treebeard, yeah.
Thank you.
Fun fact, voice of Treebeard is actually the actor who plays Gimli.
Oh yeah, I hear that. I can imagine that. Well, anyway, this is actually one of the Ents are probably the characters, the scenes I remember the most watching this film when I was a kid. I remember that woke me up. I was entrenched by that particular character and the story and what he was doing, what was happening, and I just it clicked on immediately. I'm like, oh, I remember this from when I was a kid. Great character. I really liked him. He might be my second favorite CGI thing in this whole film. But I liked how Merry and Pippin were elevated quite a bit. In the last film, you got the feeling that they were, background, third-rate characters, not the main bunch. In this one, though, I'm not sure if it was Merry or Pippin, but, they use their head and they really step up. They're not running to go back home. They're saying, we need to step in. We need to fight. We have a problem here.
Yeah. That goes along with the evolution of these two characters that we see as kind of naive, kind of immature, and then you see them mature throughout the movie into something that we would like them to be.
Well, and I think that they're kind of representative of the Shire as a whole, because in the last movie, we didn't really touch on it, but in the scenes that we have of the Shire, they do seem to be kind of isolationist, right? There, I think, is even a line where people are saying, it's beyond our borders, doesn't bother us, and they kind of look down on Gandalf because they see him as a troublemaker for taking Bilbo away and kind of making him an oddity because he's an adventurer. I think that it was really interesting to pair characters from that isolationist spot, very inward-looking place, with the Ents, who are very similar. I mean, Treebeard even says, I'm not on anyone's side because no one is on my side. They, would rather just go on sleeping. And so the fact that they're able to rouse not only the Ents but themselves is really inspiring. I thought that Treebeard and the Ents were kind of tragic if you think about it, with their lines about the Ent wives, and how it's been so long that they wouldn't even recognize them now.
Oh yeah, how they lost them.
Yeah, how the forest has been sort of neglected in general.
What's called? So do you think Tolkien was trying to get not political? What was the right phrase? Ecological?
Environmental?
Yeah, environmental. Do you think when he was first writing this book?
I'm not sure, mostly because these books were written. I believe he had the idea and started writing during World War One, and then he also continued writing during World War Two.
I'm not a huge Tolkien historian, but I know a thing or two about World War One. If he was, sort of on the ground in a position to see, I guess, the carnage of the First World War, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him kind of glorifying the wilderness. To see that people aren't appreciating the trees in the forest anymore, and to have Treebeard give those lines and kind of be sad about it, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think if you look at the Uruk-hai and the Orc side, how they're kind of more mechanized, I think that fits with the whole World War One narrative as well. Even the bomb, this is much later in the film, but the bomb that they use to blow up the wall of Helm's Deep, it looks kind of like an old timey sea mine.
It's true.
So I think that if you're looking for it, the whole industrialization is bad. People should appreciate nature aspect. I think that's there to find.
Did you guys notice how? And I thought this was really interesting because I didn't notice this the first time I saw the film. Even Saruman, the former White Wizard, the old fuck. Even he treats even he treats the gunpowder like it's magic. Even he's very cautious around it. After I'm jumping a little forward, but after a Worm Tongue, leaves and kind of betrays.
Oh, and he leans over with the candle.
Yeah, he's like, no. Like he treats it like magic. It's interesting to see just tiny little tidbits of real world kind of like breaking into this just a little bit.
Well, sure, and I think that's an ongoing theme. This has been kind of studied very thoroughly by now, but if you pick up on it, if you really listen, a lot of the trilogy is kind of about magic almost leaving the world. Like, the elves are growing lesser and lesser in power. The Ents have been asleep for ages. So many of the formerly magical beings, no longer exist.
Yeah, the rings of power are dying.
We see a dragon, but it's a firework.
Yeah, from the first one. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about the trilogy as a whole. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. What's it called? So, this film does a really good job. I want to talk about it right now. In the editing, when they're jumping from one, because again, you mentioned that there's kind of three stories. There's Merry and Pippin on one end. There's Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli on the other. And then on the last end, we see Frodo and Samwise. We have three different stories going on simultaneously. And you never feel confused or lost. Did you guys notice the slight difference in lighting in each of the stories? Granted, they're in completely different settings, but I think that's just another way to kind of help us like differentiate, like we're on this path versus that path.
Oh, I hadn't noticed that. That's an interesting thing. Yeah, but we definitely have those three different stories. There's Aragorn too, and it's interesting to see how he's developing, because we know. I mean, I think it's not difficult to suss out that he's going to try to eventually reclaim that throne, or that's going to fall to him. It's interesting to see him then interact with another king, with Theoden.
Oh yeah, because I mean, this is where we start seeing the culmination of Aragorn the King. Also, another little fun tidbit that you don't really notice unless you're looking at it, but on Aragorn's wrists, he's actually wearing these leather gauntlets, and they were Boromir's from Fellowship, and he had taken them off and put them on him when he died to remember him.
Oh goodness, yeah, that is something that I had missed, but it's a great detail to keep in for sharp-eyed people who really like those details. It makes the world real.
And then let's just talk about how Viggo Mortensen, the actor who played Aragorn, he took a lot of damage for this movie.
We have that infamous scene where he breaks his foot here, I believe.
Yeah, so when the story's getting going, the Uruk-hai stop to set up camp, and during a scuffle of when they're deciding on what to eat, one half of the Uruk-hai is saying, let's eat the hobbits. The other half is like, we can't eat them. They're for Saruman. They end up killing an Uruk-hai, and they end up eating him. And during that scuffle, they get raided on by the Rohan soldiers, and leading to Merry and Pippin's escape. and then the next day, Legolas and Gimli and Aragorn end up getting stopped by the Rohan soldiers and finding out thus that, well, this is the first time we're introduced to the Rohan soldiers, and you get the feeling that they're these that yes, they're an army, but they're kind of rough around the edges.
Definitely. I mean, Rohan is kind of a horse-based society, and I think that you can kind of see that in their cities, as well as in kind of how they fight. You get the sense that, I mean, I don't recall like seeing a Rohan farm, for instance. You know, it just seems like it's 100% mountains and wide open spaces for them to ride. And when they're trying to kind of work in concert at the end by themselves, it doesn't really work out.
Or you do see a little bit of the farms when it goes through that whole segment of the Uruk-hai burning down these villages.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. You do see them kind of. You see them kind of general pillaging.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys get the same sense of like of urgency and like desperation from the people, like as I did? Because like that's terrifying. At one point, I think they're just over the hill, over the edge, and you see these huge monsters on these weird, I want to say like Wolverine horse things riding at you to slaughter your village. And there's no modern technology. There's no cop or military that you call in. There's no force. It's literally, oh crap, you know, a small little village, no defenses, them raiding and slaughtering everybody. And I remember I was worried because when the mom put her two children on that horse, I just remember thinking, yeah, they're orphans now. They're no way.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is in the regular cut, but I even got a scene at least of them later at a table asking where their mom was.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's there.
Oh boy, yeah.
And that's, I was like, oh man, these poor kids. Like they're going to be the thread, and they're going to be orphans.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and then when they meet the Rohan soldiers tell them, we murdered all the Uruk-hai, none survived, and then Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli roll up on the massacre, and Aragorn kicks a helmet, and Viggo Mortensen in real life breaks his toe. I think it was 2 toes. He broke.
I believe so.
Toes on that helmet. Yelled out. He could have said "ow," but no, he just yelled, and Peter Jackson said, "That's a great improvisation," and kept it in the movie.
He falls to his knees, I think, which is what I'd like to believe I would do when breaking 2 of my toes instead of just curling up in the fetal position. I had a complaint last time about Viggo Mortensen about how he kind of has this default face that he sets himself to, where it's this kind of just a blank smolder. I don't have that complaint this movie. I really enjoyed seeing Aragorn. He has sort of an interesting arc with Eowyn, and kind of in flashback with Arwen as well. That doesn't quite reach a culmination in this film, but that's understandable. It's the second of a 3-parter. I can only imagine we'll get more answers there, but here it does leave us asking.
Yeah.
Also, Fernie, I know that fact is famous about the broken toes for Aragorn, but did you guys know that Legolas, if I'm not mistaken, the actor Orlando Bloom, he had broken ribs during that whole chase scene when they're trying to catch up to the Uruk-hai. He had broken ribs, and the actor who played Gimli had a separated kneecap or a dislocated kneecap. One of the two. I wouldn't
be surprised. Oh, and not just that. Orlando Bloom, I believe it was 2 years before filming, had fallen out of a 3rd-story window, breaking his back.
Jesus!
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
So, I mean, for him to go from that and then into this role where it's hugely physical is astonishing. And I think he got this role 2 days after he graduated from the School of the Arts in, I believe it was London.
Man, I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell. He felt like a seasoned actor by this point.
And not only that, he really conveys this like sense of energy and youthfulness as this elf. And I think that Gimli kind of helps with that. They really are the odd pairing. Gimli's he seems a bit older. He seems a bit more like gruff and seasoned, whereas Legolas just seems like he's just having a bit of fun.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, Gimli's a lot more. He's a lot more seasoned, and I think just dwarves in general are just like a lot more rougher. I feel like dwarves have they have a lot more to prove.
Yeah, absolutely. Besides, we've seen, I believe, just one dwarven stronghold, and it was a ruin. So I could see them having something to prove there.
Oh, and then after the whole raid, we figure out that Merry and Pippin lived, and they stumble across Gandalf the White, leading into Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli reuniting with Gandalf the White.
Mm-hmm. And it's very interesting how much Ian McKellen brings a change to that role. I mean, Gandalf the White, I suppose he is a different person, but he definitely acts like a different person than Gandalf the Grey. From the beginning, where he's introducing himself, he's saying, "Oh yeah, that was what people called me." He's kind of sussing out memories of his past life as someone new.
Yeah, and plus, when you saw him as Gandalf the Grey, he did have his serious moments, but you can also tell like he wasn't as serious all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And getting revived as Gandalf the White, you could tell he had a mission.
Yeah, and I think he might have had kind of more knowledge than he was letting on to anyone. I almost got the sense that he could see things that were going to happen, because I think that because he saw Merry and Pippin, and he later saw the rest of the Fellowship, I would think the natural thing to do would be just to bring them back, right? But it almost seemed like he was moving chess pieces around because he had an outcome that he wanted to engineer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And plus, I feel like he knew like that they had to go on these journeys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe he knew that Merry and Pippin were the only ones that could, kind of spur the Ents to action.
Yeah, because I mean, we don't know if Aragorn would have gone on this kingly rite of passage. We wouldn't know if Aragorn would have gone on this kingly rite of passage if the Fellowship would have stayed together. Maybe Gandalf knew that while they were splintered, they had their own paths to go on.
Definitely, and I think it's really interesting the different journeys that they go on, because these are kind of different. They all have their difficulties, but some are most definitely rougher than others. I think that Frodo and Sam might have the worst of it, especially with they start off with marsh ghosts trying to kill them. Those look very good, very creepy.
Oh yeah, I remember those were creepy, but I just remember thinking when Frodo went down, I was half expecting him to like teleport or something. Again, bear in mind this is from not watching it like over the course of like 15 years. I wasn't expecting that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, when he sees the dead ghosts in the marsh.
Yeah, and then Sam continues to be the ultimate bro. Oh no, Smeagol saves him, not Sam.
Exactly, because Sam, and I thought this might have been another detail, this might have been on purpose, Sam can't swim.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Smeagol has, his really weird strength, because he's all bone, essentially, but it seems like when it comes to the ring, he's superhuman.
There's also a way to distinguish Smeagol and Gollum. So if you look at the eyes, whenever Smeagol talks, the pupils get super big, like a hopeful child. Mm-hmm. And when Gollum talks, the eyes get super dilated.
Well, another great detail surrounding that is when Frodo calls him Smeagol. I mean, all throughout, Gollum has been using us, and he's muttering to himself a lot, of course, because I guess the two personalities in him have a lot of arguing to do, but he tells Frodo, "What did you call me?" And I thought that was a really nice kind of turning point for their relationship.
Yeah, it's like the Martha of the movie. Except,
I'm not gonna bite
they
that.
didn't
I'm
ruin it.
not gonna bite that. So let's move on.
Well, speaking
Uh,
of things that we weren't expecting, it's been really interesting watching this movie and seeing it as a movie and not like as a cultural touchstone that gets references and all sorts of other things. I wasn't expecting that we would get Gandalf the White almost right at the beginning. I had assumed that he would come back like during a battle scene, but he's an actual character in this film, not as much as in the last one, but definitely he's a presence.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't, they didn't need to do like this. Like, yeah, his revival was a little bit of shock and awe, but it wasn't like in a battle where there's this huge score playing and then you just see him pop up. Like, they actually made it they actually made him a character for this movie.
well, actually, and for sure you knew this, Fernando, but they spoiled Gandalf's return for any non-fans of the book in the previews. Uh, which, again, if you were a fan, you knew he was going to be returning, but I guarantee you, a lot of people didn't. A lot of people that watched this film, just never read the books, never did the research, and they spoiled it in the trailers.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I mean, it'd been so long since I really don't remember even seeing TV spots for these movies. Except maybe Return of the King. But yeah, I didn't even know that.
It makes a little bit more sense than a lot of the trailer spoilers nowadays. Personally, I try not to watch the trailers for movies that I really want to see, just so I can be surprised if there are any substantial spoilers in the trailer. But for something like this, because it's not that climactic end of the movie surprise, I think it's more fair to put it in the trailer, just because, I mean, Gandalf is going to be around most of the movie.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, it's not like a late movie thing. It's not going to be something that is going to ruin the ending. It's something that you're going to see fairly early on.
And then so after they meet up with Gandalf the White, they end up going to Rohan's capital, Eros?
Yeah, you said it right. Good job.
Hey, I finally got one. So they go to Eros, and they're forced to surrender the weapons initially, but Gandalf kind of plays it smart. He's meek, like, you wouldn't rob an old man of his walking cane, would you? And he even makes a point of grabbing Legolas like he's limping.
Mm-hmm.
And then
he's hiding that he's the White too.
Oh yeah, he hides his white cloak.
Yeah, and then he's able to free Theoden.
Yep.
That's two for.
He's able to use the newfound Gandalf the White magic and pretty much take out the cancer that Saruman had placed in him.
And then in Theoden, from his reaction, he's about to kill Wormtongue. Did you guys notice how much mercy plays a role in this particular film of the series? Like, in the whole series, mercy is a thing. But in this particular one, Frodo showing mercy to Gollum. And this one, Aragorn telling him, like, hey, like, this won't bring your son back. Calm down.
Yeah, I think that Aragorn showing mercy is kind of part of that development toward being a king. At least that's what I took it as. When I first saw that, I thought, this seems kind of out of place. He's not the law and Rohan the king is. But then I realized this is part of his own development toward being a king, I think. And as well, I mean, you see when Frodo is merciful toward Gollum, that has, good consequences. Mercy has some value here.
Right?
Oh, and then we're introduced to Éomer and Éowyn, two brother and sister. They are nieces, and they are the niece and nephew of the king. Éomer is actually banished from Rohan during Theoden's spell. And so we lose that character in the very beginning, and I think it's fair to say Theoden loses probably his best general, I'd say, in his army.
Definitely, and that's obviously the part. That's obviously part of the plan of that evil vizier, trying to get him away from people that he can trust, people that are close to him. So he's isolated and he's only listening to his advisor. What did you all think of the effects on Theoden when he was spellbound?
I thought it was good. I mean, it looked like a lot of practical effects mixed with some CGI, but I mean, it looked like a lot of makeup, like to make him look old and decrepit.
And his transition from going from old and decrepit to younger than old and decrepit is pretty seamless. Some great effects. You see a lot of where the budget went in this film when it came to the CGI, but also how they balance it out with practical effects.
My own thought was that when he's ancient Theoden, the makeup is so heavy that it was kind of distracting to me. I really enjoyed like what they did to his eyes. It almost looks kind of like glassy or murky. But that transition, I agree, that was in my mind perfect.
Yeah, that transition was actually probably one of the better ones, and you see that it still holds up to this day, which is good.
Yeah. It almost looks like there's mold on his face.
Yeah.
So after this, they kind of realize, okay, there's going to be a huge attack. What do we do? And the king kind of says, we're going to, I don't know if it's fall back or move to Rivendell?
Helm's Deep.
Helm's Deep. Thank you. I'm sorry. Rivendell's something else. My bad. They're going to fall back to Helm's Deep as a defensive position to prepare for this battle. And you get a real sense of hopelessness because, at one point they do the montage and Jesus Christ, they're arming the kids and they're arming the old men. You see these like 12-year-olds being given swords that are bigger than they are and shields larger than their torsos.
Oh yeah, I believe throughout history of the Rohan army, Helm's Deep was always their last ditch effort because it's held against a mountain and because there's no other way in besides the front gate. And what we later find out is a drain that they use to exploit a weakness that they didn't even know that they had. But yeah, so they've always used Helm's Deep as their last ditch effort because no one has ever broken through.
Yeah, and that gives Theoden the opportunity to deliver some pretty good dialogue, and I found that the lines here, at least I thought, were very memorable in comparison to the last one, where he says, "Alas, that these evil days should be mine. The young perish and the old linger." I thought that was very memorable, and not just because it applies to 2020.
Yeah. Well, that was at his son's funeral, right?
I believe so. Yeah. And then also with I don't believe that we've gotten to him yet, but with Faramir's opening speech, I think that's another World War I parallel, if you're looking for it, where he says that war will make corpses of us all.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He's very grim. He's got kind of this stark reality of war. I think it's very fitting that Faramir, who's also part of the steward, I guess, family of Gondor, he's the younger brother to Boromir. Boromir, you get the sense that, in flashback at least, he's kind of this leading general, captain of the army is sort of a thing. Faramir has taken up a much less visible role. He's almost like a Black Ops commander, is the sense I get from him.
Yeah, it seems like the team that he leads, it's a lot of insurgent type work where they're more not seen, but they're felt.
Yeah, definitely. I really liked Faramir's introduction.
Where are we at this point?
When they're taking off to Helm's Deep.
Yeah, when they're prepping, and you get a sense of the urgency. You made a point that it's kind of like their fallback. It's the last thing that they have. Wormtongue made a deal with Saruman, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes.
To
Wormtongue is basically Saruman's right-hand man.
very low bar, but I
Mhm.
believe you. And they make a deal. He sends, what was it, 10,000 orcs to go attack the stronghold, is it not?
I believe it is 10,000. And I think that there's some Urukai in that number. But basically, the idea is that, you know.
Oh no, so Saruman, sorry to interrupt you, but
Oh, yeah.
Saruman's army is all Urukai.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was kind of
Upgrade.
curious as to what the difference was.
Mm.
I think Urukai are manipulated elves, so they're kind of unnatural. They're kind of built, and you kind of see that in the makeup when you see them in the light.
Yeah. Yeah. They
They
have an
look like they're
interaction.
falling apart.
Right. And they have an interaction earlier on, too, where I think that you do see, like, Urukai and orcs side by side. And you definitely see the Urukai kind of, like, domineering the smaller orcs. Uh,
Yeah.
so so yeah, basically the idea for Saruman is, we've got Helm's Deep, which is, like you said, built into the side of a mountain, virtually impregnable. So he almost custom builds an army to break it down.
Yep. And a little fun fact about that scene where Wormtongue is like, "But how are we gonna do this? We need an army of 1,000 orcs," and then he's like 10,000, and then they walk out and they see the army. So that chanting that you hear is it was provided from a cricket stadium. They had everyone in the cricket stadium yell that out and use that audio.
That's awesome.
Okay, I would not have expected that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sound design, especially when you get creative with it, is a really powerful part of movies. I mean, you think of the stories of like how they made the T Rexes roar in Jurassic Park, or things like this, where you get bunch of soccer fans who's going to give you those impassioned, blood curdling roars.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. Actually, oh no, I'll get into it later. So during the prep, there's actually an argument that I thought was a slightly uncharacteristic, but I guess it makes sense, where Legolas and Aragorn get into an argument, and Legolas even says, like, these aren't soldiers, you're gonna die here, like, we'll die. And is he like kind of telling Aragorn, like, let's get the fuck out of here, or is like what exactly? Like, what's his end game in that argument? And also, do you think that's characteristic, or do you think that's just,
I think he was just having a dark moment, and I guess he was just having it very publicly.
Yeah, I like I mentioned, I thought of Legolas always as this kind of like younger guy, and when he kind of breaks to Aragorn, I mean Aragorn is I think he's younger than Legolas, because Legolas is an elf and Aragorn is 87, which is but not that much for an elf. But he's still sort of the leader. I always took him as kind of the commander of the group. So it makes sense that Legolas, who's maybe, looking up to him, to talk to Aragorn about that.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense. For me, yeah, it was just always just, I think he was just having a dark moment, and maybe just speaking his mind when he should have just not have been doing that.
Yeah, not in front of all the people who are going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although really, it's Aragorn's fault for replying in English.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know what they were talking about when they were just speaking Elvish. But what he says, then I'll die with them.
Yeah, and during that whole rant, there's a nice little shout out to the 300 Spartan story.
Wait, when?
He says 300 men against 10,000 orcs.
Oh,
nice. I didn't notice that.
It's a nice little like callback to that.
Well, and the interesting thing is, I actually thought of 300. This is a later shot, but when the Uruk-hai are holding out their spears against that final horse charge, that reminded me a little bit of like the shield wall. I mean, obviously that's not intentional or whatever. I don't believe that 300 even come out yet, but just it reminded me of that too. It's interesting to see two kind of reminders of that be here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then we didn't even talk about the warg attack, the wolf-like creatures that attack Rohan on the way to Helm's Deep.
Oh yeah, they think they originally thought Aragorn was dead. I forgot about that part.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, that reminds me of a question I had. His initial love interest, Liv Tyler's character. I can't remember her name.
Arwen and Eric.
So, I have a question. She's part elf, so she'll live well beyond his lifetime. Isn't there a way for her to become mortal? That way she only lives as long as he does? Because I know they get together.
I believe it was her giving him the necklace.
Oh, okay.
See, and I was confused about that too, actually, because from the way that Elrond talks about it, he says that she's still going to outlive him, but will remain mortal. So it's almost as though giving him that necklace means that she will die, but her lifespan is still longer, I guess.
I think so, but I thought her giving up that necklace already started the clock on her mortalness. And I guess Elrond was just trying to kind of scare her into leaving Aragorn because he didn't want her to give up her immortality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think that's what that kind of vision of the future with her by Aragorn's corpse and him saying that, she'll age and, she'll have no comfort, etc. I thought that that's what he was talking about, that even though she would die, it wouldn't be for a long, long time until after he did. And so she'd spend most of her time alone. That's what I thought kind of his worry was.
That makes sense.
Can we jump into Helm's Deep? Because, god damn, I have a lot to say about that.
Well, before that, so in that scene where Aragorn gets thrown off the cliff and he's floating down the river after the warg attack, he almost drowned filming that scene.
Oh, Viggo.
God, this guy was not meant to survive this film.
Apparently not. But yeah, he almost drowned filming that scene. Yeah, there's like some behind the scenes footage, and then you see him pop up, and he was just like, I was already starting to run out of air.
It's like this period armor was really weighing me down, He's wearing like 150 pounds of steel.
But yeah, let's jump into Helm's Deep, the coup de grace of the movie.
The opening to Helm's Deep kind of gives us the last scene that we have for a good bit between Aragorn and Eowyn. And Eowyn has kind of been attaching herself to Aragorn throughout the time that they know each other. And I wasn't sure, maybe you guys have some thoughts. Were they trying to make that kind of a love triangle?
It's not so much a love triangle. It's more so a one-sided love. Because you do get the feeling that Aragorn is kind of flirting with her, but in the end, you could tell like he's all about Arwen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we get into the battle itself.
And so they start this. The battle starts off really quiet, and you just hear them stomping towards it. And then, thunder.
Wait. We forgot the introduction of the elves.
Yes. They came to honor the truce that was once held.
And we are again met up with the character from Fellowship. I can't remember his name, but he was there at Lothlorien Falls.
Oh, okay. And he's the one who dies later in the battle, right?
Yeah.
See, I thought it was strange that they gave, so much attention to it, but I kind of brushed it off as just a dramatic moment. But, okay, we've seen him before. Just that I didn't remember. Okay.
Yeah, I remember seeing him. I just can't remember who he was with. But He arrives with some serious backup, some solid, A+ players. Not a high enough number to really turn the tide, but hopefully enough to, man the gates. Um, these elves arrive and they just stack the very top of the castle. Did either of you get the sense that you really wanted to be there, like in person, to be a part of this battle?
Most definitely.
Like,
Oh yeah,
it felt epic.
Like a great time. I mean, especially because going back to this from earlier, we start off the battle, I believe, with Gimli and Legolas, and the first gag is that Gimli, can't see over that parapet. Legolas is asking if he should find him a box. So
Yeah.
there's a good bit of levity there before the Uruk-hai crash into the gates and they, smash their siege ladders into the walls and things get really intense.
Real quick, I didn't even notice the music in this. I just noticed the sound. You hear the footsteps quiet in the distance, and then right when the thunder hits, that instigates, you see the size of the army, and this goes to the practical effects of it. God damn, an army has never looked so realistic. The Hobbit tried to recreate this scene and failed miserably, I think, because of its lack of practical effects. Because, god damn, that army looked real and they looked terrifying.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And I think the craziest part about that whole Helm's Deep scene is that it took 4 months to shoot, and they were shooting at night only. And while, yes, they did provide some rain for it, a lot of it was natural rain. So these guys were pretty much zombies for 4 months.
Oh, god damn. Yeah, that's right. It took 120 days to film like that siege, but that's I guess without jumping too deep into it yet, but it's the benchmark that most movie battle scenes like try to live up to.
Yep.
I would agree, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is a 5-day battle. Is that what that is? Because Gandalf says, I believe, to look for him on the dawn of the 5th day. Look to the east, and he'll be there. So they've been fighting day and night.
Oh, so when Gandalf says on the 5th day, look to the east, that was from the day that he left. Because remember, he takes off from Rohan on a different path, opposed to them going to Helm's Deep. So I think it took them 4 days to get to Helm's Deep.
Okay.
And on the 5th day, that's when he shows up.
And that makes a lot of sense because that confused me a little bit. I was wondering, I knew that there was a huge battle. There's a scale of the battle. It even has stages, where they break the outer wall and they're kind of retreating to the inner castle and they're focusing on like the gate or the drain at various points. It felt like a long time, but I just didn't get like a day-night cycle out of it. But it makes sense. It was kind of an overnight battle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, they introduce bombs, magic developed by Saruman to blow up the wall that they said had never been breached before.
Well, before we get to that bomb, so they start out by firing arrows, and they're just slaughtering this army, but the numbers are so overwhelming. I don't know how you don't lose hope just looking at that. Like, I felt like they didn't have enough arrows, even if every single one was a one-hit kill. I don't think they had enough, man.
No.
Well, I think
10,000 against a few hundred. No, they were severely outnumbered.
Definitely, because Theoden, he almost seems to lose hope. I mean, and it kind of takes Aragorn, which I think this is just another step on his like king's journey. But he basically says like you have to stand fast. And what's more, he doesn't just want to hold; he wants to turn the tables on it. It says, "Yeah, screw it, attack."
Yeah, and you really see Aragorn coming into his general position, and eventually leading to him becoming king. But you see him basically developing those skills that he would need to be king.
Definitely.
Did you guys give gotcha. Okay, did you guys give Aragorn and Theoden could you guys see the mirror image of each other? One one is like a young king, well, young leader, going to become a king, courageous, wanting to, let's fight, let's go forward, let's do this. But on the other side, Theoden he's a little more concerned about his people. He's more like, we can't do this, like they'll die. There's a bit of give and take there. You understand both men. One is, battle tested. He's seen suffering. He doesn't want any more death. And on the other side, you see a young man who's going to become king very soon, who's very, optimistic and like, we can do this. Let's go. Did you guys see that contrast as well as I did?
I completely agree. I mean, I think that both of these men, the current king and then a future king, I think they have a lot to learn from each other because they've both made some mistakes, right? I mean, Aragorn has spent the majority of his life kind of running away from this calling, and Theoden has, up until recently, been a puppet of evil, I think, honestly, that's part of the reason, at least, why his people are so scared, simply because, I mean, there's no, stability there. So I think the two balance off of each other very well.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially what you said, Eddie. Because, I mean, Theoden's a war-hardened king, and Aragorn is, while he is old, which we come to find out in Return of the King, he's not young. I don't know if you all want to know this, if you all don't mind.
Oh, I found out because of the extended edition. They just spoil it there.
Yeah, so Aragorn is a part of this race of men who live unusually long. Not as long as elves, but long. I believe it's in the extended version of Return of the King. We find out that Aragorn actually fought in battle with Theoden's grandfather.
Yeah, and that's actually... Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting. That was, I guess, why I give more importance to the whole interaction with him and Eowyn, because in this movie, in the extended cut at least, they have more talking, I guess, and that actually comes up. She's really curious about him. She keeps asking about him, and he'll mention that to her, and it kind of brings up that fact that he's 87.
Yeah.
Damn.
Okay. So then it's in the extended version of this movie, where he mentions that he fought in war with his with Theoden's grandfather, because he mentions that Theoden was just a boy when he first met him.
Yeah, he's got a good memory. He must have been 5.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that part. I believe it. I just don't remember it.
Oh, the extended.
Oh, it's in the extended version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got an hour extra, so.
Good for you.
But in this movie, I didn't mind it at all, I want to say. I mean, I haven't seen the regular version, but I can only imagine that if I'd seen that one first, I wouldn't mind, the extra time. I could see myself wanting more.
So throughout this battle, with all the practical effects and whatnot, you get an idea for the scale. And I want to talk about Peter Jackson for a sec. The way he does this battle scene, it's a lot of give and take. There's hope and dread, but you keep going back and forth. That's what any good filmmaker would do. The army shows up. The army's coming. Oh crap! The elves show up. Hey! The army shows up and they're terrifying. Oh crap! Oh, the arrows are slaughtering them. Yay! And I mean, it keeps going up and down. You keep getting new highs and new lows. You think Legolas is gonna stop the guy with a bomb? He hits the guy with an arrow 3 times, and you're thinking, oh, he got him, and then nope, he makes it.
He falls right into the bomb.
Yeah, there was literally nothing more that could have been done to prevent this guy from getting through with the bomb.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to Peter Jackson, that what a great director he is, that he knew, hey, this battle could have very easily just been 2 sides slugging it out, but he had the wherewithal to know, hey, I need to organize this that way my audience enjoys this and has an idea of the scale. From the filming perspective, the orcs are almost always facing towards the left, and the good guys are almost always facing towards the right. You have a very good idea of what's going on, who's happening, where you're at because of that. Those little things. I'm a bit of a film geek, and I noticed those little techniques that he's doing. I'm like, God damn, this is a piece of art. Not just from a logistic perspective, but the way it's edited.
I think that it really showcases to the talents of the cast and their fight choreography. I think it gives Gimli a moment to shine and show that he's not just the comic relief, because he's racking up that kill count to rival Legolas here, and Legolas has a ranged weapon. He got to start earlier.
Oh, when he's standing on top of the wall and he's knocking Uruk-hai off with on the ladders, he's like 31, 32.
It's like that. Wait, doesn't he shoot one guy and Gimli's like, that still only counts as one?
Yeah. That was a classic moment.
But yeah, so this scene, it keeps going back and forth, and they keep having to retreat. Unfortunately, they have to go back to the back wall, and then to a point where they get so desperate that Aragorn tells them, "Hey, is there any way to get the women and children out, and we'll hold the gates? Can you get them back?"
Yeah, further development for him.
Yeah. Also, again, I'm sorry, I just noticed all these little tidbits. The music stops when they're at the door, and I think Theoden asks Aragorn, "Buy me some time. How long do you need? As long as you can get me. Barricade the doors." And the music cuts, and all you hear is the sound of men yelling and grunting, and sound of metal clanking while they're trying to hold the doors, hold off the Uruk-hai. And again, just more fat master filmmaking. I don't know if this is fair to say or if this is a compliment. I hope it is. This might be Peter Jackson's magnum opus as far as fight and action scenes are concerned, because I've seen his other films, and although his other films are great, I'd argue this might be his peak as far as action is concerned.
I really love the cinematography in this movie. Obviously he's helped out by the fact that he just has these beautiful vistas that he can show. But I completely agree. This is an excellent piece of the craft here.
Yeah. Peter Jackson, this whole trilogy is just, where he shined. Unfortunately, I don't want to say it's his peak, but I think this is his peak, and everything that he does from here on out, it's just going to be, is it as good as Lord of the Rings? And unfortunately, I don't think he can ever live up to it, because I feel like Lord of the Rings was just this thing that happened at the right time with the right circumstances. Because, we saw what happened with The Hobbit.
Yeah.
It was made over 10 years later, and it did not do so well because of the overly CGI.
Yeah, no, and that's source material too. Lord of the Rings by itself, just the novel and the books that Tolkien wrote, for them to last all these decades later, he really was kind of given gold, and I think he and the cast really worked wonders with it.
Agreed.
And then we also get to see the culmination of Merry and Pippin's story, where they stop living as naive, and they finally decide to do something, and they help turn the tide of the war and sending the Ents to Isengard to destroy the factories they're developing the Uruk-hai. And he shows Treebeard what Saruman has done to his home, and he took Treebeard, who was kind of a pacifist. He didn't want to fight. He said that this war was not his war. And then Merry showed him, no, this is your war. This is everybody's war. And he used the power of the Ents to help destroy Isengard and destroy one major aspect of this two-front war.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't that go kind of towards the arrogance of Saruman? To believe that the Ents, you had to believe that there was going to be some kind of retaliation for slaughtering all these trees and kind of clearing the deforestation. There had to be some kind of backlash.
Well, I think he's kind of blinded to that from his transformation in the first movie. I mean, evil is kind of corrupted and taken hold of his mind. I think that either he didn't think anything was going to happen, because keep in mind, the Ents, according to Treebeard, have been asleep for a long, long time. I think that he thought they would stay asleep, or else that he was powerful enough to overcome them if anything happened. There definitely is an arrogance there. This is also, I think, kind of a World War I point, the fact that a country has to be directly, attacked and have people die to get involved. I can see that possibly being an influence, but I love all the details surrounding the Ents and what Treebeard says about them, about how they sleep for a long time, and about how even their speech is extremely slow. It really makes you think of like the world of a tree. What is this sentient plant going to do, and how is it going to act?
This might be one of the dumb things, but I just had the biggest smile on my face when he was talking about like oak, ashwood, calling all these different kinds of wood. I don't know why. I thought that was funny. I thought that was a good little sense of humor, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
But
I love when it's been a few hours and he said, "We've decided that you're not orcs."
Oh yeah, their meetings.
Yeah, gee, man, they're. But
I thought my work meetings were bad.
Oh man, you don't want to talk about rental cars. Trust me.
I was a little bit confused about is how to think of Isengard, because with Gondor or with Rohan, obviously they're their own countries, right? Same thing with the lands of the elves. But with Isengard, it almost just seems like it's Saruman's tower for him to hang out and make minions. It's not like a country, right?
More like a city. It's more. I'd say it's more like a fortress. I think Saruman is. I think he thinks he's on par with Sauron, and he's trying to be, but he's not.
That makes sense. I was confused too, because when the Ents come walking out of the woods, it's a magnificent scene. I mean, you see Uruk-hai just being stepped on, being thrown. It's wonderful to see. It's great action.
It's a one-sided ass whooping. Sorry.
Absolutely, it is. No, you're not wrong at all. I was a little confused as to why it was so one-sided. I mean, I would have thought that Saruman would take kind of a direct hand. I was surprised he wasn't using his magic there.
I think he lost his magic.
Well, it also seemed kind of overwhelming, because, I mean, I imagine he might be a wizard, but I doubt he's very good at strategy. The smart move would have been, hey, let's keep like 2,000 Uruk-hai here as like a defense force while we send over, everyone else. But I think he kind of, quote unquote, blew his whole load, sending all 10,000 Uruk-hai to go to Helm's Deep, and leaving his place pretty much undefended except for some weak ass orcs that got pwned.
I mean, yeah, that's it. Definitely does seem like he only had like 50 dudes in his whole tower. That's an interesting point that you raised, Fernie. If that was the case, I definitely would have liked for that to be kind of elaborated on or explained more. That by turning to evil, he's sort of lost the magic power, because we know that Gandalf now has the title of the White. It just would have been good to know that he now has like whatever abilities that Saruman lost.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, at the end of the film, we see Frodo and Sam going off of their detour with Faramir, who was going to take Frodo and make the same mistake his brother did and try to take the ring from Frodo, but eventually realized that no, he has to go on his own path as well. And you see Frodo and Sam leaving Osgiliath, where they were being held, and you see Gollum realizing that Frodo betrayed him.
Yeah, and he kind of has that debate, because Sam, at least in the extended cut, maybe this doesn't happen normally, but Sam tries to kind of explain the situation by saying that no, they would have shot you otherwise. Frodo just was trying to save you. But Gollum, I think, takes that opportunity to confuse Smeagol. I mean, if you can think of them as two different people.
Yeah, I think that was in the extended cut, but yeah, I think Gollum used that to manipulate Smeagol back onto his side. Because at one point in the movie, Smeagol tells Gollum, "Go away and never come back."
Yeah, exactly. And prior to that, I mean, Frodo kind of he goes into this almost like a trance state where there's a ring wraith, I believe, right above the city, flying on this. I don't even know what sort of a mount it is, but it looks very menacing. It's a great effect there. So he's going to the highest point that he can reach. He's about to put on the ring until Sam shows up.
Oh yeah, when the Nazgul pops out,
and he's surrounded, I believe, at one point by but I'm not sure what they are. They're ghosts of some kind, but it's another good example of how creepy the film can be. I mean, it's definitely mostly like fantasy action, but it has its moments that can unsettle you.
Yeah, it does, and it is crazy to see like that this movie was able to pull that off pretty well.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I may have touched on this earlier, but finally you kind of see Sam and Frodo when they're arguing, going back and forth, and Frodo threatens Sam. Sam's trying to talk to him like, "Hey, I'm your Sam, like I'm your friend," and I begin to feel pity for Frodo, and I think that's the first time I feel bad for Gollum, like Gollum more than anything else, because it's like Jesus, like you're seeing the toll it's taking on him, and he's changing. He's changing from this like really peppy, smart, like happy kid, smiling, to like almost gutting his best friend.
Yeah, there's a couple minutes at the end there where they're in the city. Where Frodo looks like he's in an emo band. He's kind of got like this pale skin, like glassy eyes, got bangs, kind of. It took me out just a little bit, but that's just with hindsight. Definitely, Frodo has become burdened in his soul by the ring and by Sauron, like constantly reaching out for it.
Yeah, and then you see Sam really having to go into his role and becoming the get back guy. So he always has to bring Frodo back into reality.
No, definitely. I mean, and again, this may have been just extended, but where the two of them talk about stories, I thought was a really good moment for me.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Oh, yeah. At the end. Yeah, no, that one's a theatrical cut as well.
Oh, good. It should have been, honestly, because that moment where Frodo says, Frodo would never have made it this far without Sam. That was just a very nice moment. Shout out to my Sam friends. I have a couple out there.
No, yeah, and then you really see you see at the end of the movie when everything's starting to ramp up, especially when Gandalf, Éomer, Aragorn, Legolas, and all of them are looking at Mordor, and they know that this battle was won, but the biggest battle is coming.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really nice details, even at the end. I just really appreciate how much Peter Jackson puts into the movie in terms of thought, attention to detail. For instance, that flaming end. The Uruk-hai have the idea to set one of them on fire, and it looks like it's working because the ant moves in kind of like this panicked, jerky way. But when they open the dam at the end, you see that same ant like in the background, like put himself out using the water.
I love that scene. I'm like, oh, he's okay.
Yeah, just that the movie is filled with things like that, and personally, that's just one of my favorite things about movies is the level of detail you can put in there.
So real quick, I'm sorry, we've been jumping around so much. Did we cover the very ending of the Battle of Helm's Deep where Gandalf shows up with like all the backup you could ever ask for?
No, we didn't. But so when Aragorn finally has the revelation of getting Theoden to ride out with him to the battle, to give the people enough time to escape, and realizing that this is the 5th day that Gandalf is supposed to arrive. You see Gandalf arrive with Éomer, who has fulfilled his oath to the king and his uncle, to bring backup.
Yeah, you have that charge down the hill, facing away from the sun, so that it's directly in the Uruk-hai's eye. It's kind of magnificent.
The way it is, Gandalf the White, it's the hope, the way he's coming down the hill with that massive, overwhelming force of backup to just completely destroy the Uruk-hai from the other side. It feeds into that whole idea, hope and hope and despair, how he keeps going back and forth. Because if I'm not mistaken, wasn't there a line between the two, well, the old and the young king, and if I'm not mistaken, one of them says, we'll ride out, we'll die, and let's go out and blaze of glory. Is it something along those lines of
Yeah, Theoden says that. Aragorn says, ride out with me, ride out and meet them head on, and Theoden says, for glory, and then Aragorn says, no, for your kingdom, for Rohan.
Yeah, and this is important to point out too, that this is a desperate gambit, but it's pretty much all done to cover the fact that the women and children and all the civilians are running away into the mountains, and they need to buy time so that they can get away safely.
Exactly. But that said, between all these action sequences and whatnot, this film is a huge step up for me from the first. This is going to be a long final thoughts, but the first film was good, and I felt like this took everything from the first film and elevated it. I feel like I give more of a shit about all these characters a lot more now than it was before. I'm more invested.
Definitely. I mean, I think that all of the complaints that I had about the first one have been answered to some extent. I'm having a great time right from the get-go. It doesn't take me a while to get into it. I'm loving the characterization here, loving the cinematography, the interplay between characters, and how the plot threads develop and unravel. I really thought that this was a big step up from that first film.
Oh yeah, for me, this movie will always have a special place in my heart because it was one of the first DVDs I owned, so I remember watching the special features for this every day, and I remember watching this movie every day, and to see that how Peter Jackson seamlessly intertwined these 3 storylines without making it too clunky or making it too convoluted, and doing it so well, and it's still holding up to this day, is insane. But it will always be one of my favorite movies. I feel like it elevates the characters to what they're going to be, and it just makes you, if you grew up in that time, it made you super excited for the next movie.
Also, I think, Fernie, I know you know a hell of a lot about these films, and rightfully so, but did you know that this, for J.R.R. Tolkien, when he was originally writing this, the 3 books, it was meant to actually be one very long story that he was going to publish over a long period of time. He was going to publish, chapter 1, 2, 3. This was all meant to be one really long story. But because of a paper shortage at the time and publishing deadlines, he instead ended up making this into 3 separate books, which ended up being 3 separate films. So do you guys kind of feel how, Act 1 setting everything up and, it has its own kind of climax. Act 2, everything gets elevated. The hero finds his powers, the villains close in, and, big action sequence. And then it feels like we're going into a climax. It feels like Return of the King is going to be one really long 3rd act where everything comes to a head.
I would agree. I think that with everything that Tolkien put into this story, I think you can tell this in a lot of ways. It's just interesting to me, for instance, the flashbacks. I kind of wonder how the film and how the series would have developed if those hadn't been flashbacks. If we had seen, for instance, like near the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, the relationship between Boromir and Faramir. If we had understood like what Boromir was going through that entire time instead of learning it in hindsight, with all of the effort and all the like experience that Tolkien put into the story, I think that you could tell the Lord of the Rings in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think it works in this 3-act structure, like you say, Eddie. But I mean, there have been talks of developing a miniseries at various points. I think it could work in that way also. I wonder, for instance, about the flashbacks in this film. If you had put those chronologically, if we had started out the Fellowship of the Ring knowing what Boromir's struggle was instead of finding it out kind of in post, I think that would have worked as well. I think that this story is very versatile in that way.
Agreed.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I know it was actually at one point supposed to be 2 books, and I think the publishing company convinced them to make a third one. But no, I mean, I think this movie, I think this book being done as 3 parts makes sense. I mean, pretty much the best things have been done in 3 parts.
I mean, when you actually have the source material to back it up, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So this film, it feels like it did its job. It made me care more about the characters, elevated the action, amazing set pieces, amazing practical effects, landmark CGI character. Damn, I can't wait to watch Return of the King now. I blame you for that, Fernie.
I mean, I would have liked this energy back in the day when I tried to show you these movies for the first time.
Look, I was stupid and I was 8 and I loved Harry Potter. All right?
And now he's not 8.
Shut up. Wait. I'm sorry. I give my final thoughts. Alejandro, you did. Fernie, did you?
I mean, my final thoughts for this movie, it holds up to what I remember as a kid. It holds up to the feelings I felt when I watched this movie. I mean, I was surprised that as a kid, I was able to keep up with this movie and understand like the different nuances of the film and the certain themes. I mean, this movie came out in 2002. I was in the 2nd grade. But no, I mean, these movies will always have a special place in my heart. One thing that I love to touch on is, I think this franchise made a ton of money, and not just because of the box office, but because of DVD sales. This movie made a ton of money, and it's kind of like one of the last things for a certain genre of film. Last film to use really good practical effects along with budding CGI, and then also to make significant amount of money from DVD sales is already it's already considered a pastime.
Fernando, what would you grade this film? Granted, it's entrenched in your soul, so try not to be biased.
Out of 5 stars, I'd give it 4.5. I mean, that last half, I'd give it to the extended version, but not because it makes it better, but because it just adds more flavor to the story.
Okay, all right. Alex?
The last movie, I harped a bit about how it felt timely. It felt like you could really kind of date it to a certain point. This movie feels timeless. I feel like it definitely holds up after these, 18 years. It wouldn't surprise me if in another 18 I could put this on for entertainment. I think that a lot of care went into this one. I feel like Jackson has really kind of grown into his potential as a filmmaker for the Two Towers. I give it an A.
I'm gonna have to agree with you, man. This film is incredible. Granted, you need to watch the first one to truly understand everything that's going on in this one, but I mean, as far as sequels go, this does everything and more. This is a Toy Story 2 in every way, and that's a compliment coming from me. A, easy.
And thanks again for joining us, Fernie. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure recording with you.
Pleasure's all mine. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe.
If you're listening to us via podcast, please subscribe. We'd greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to hear more about our thoughts on movies, go to therollback.net. I've been Alex.
I've been Eddie.
And I've been Fernie, and this was The Rollback.